You are listening to How to Feel Like a Midlife Goddess, the place where midlife women come to feel supported, inspired and understood. I'm Amanda. I'm a nutritionist and health coach and a champion of women like you in their 40s, 50s, 60s and beyond. And I'm here to remind you that you can feel like a midlife goddess at any age. And we know it's all about how you feel rather than how you look. So this is a podcast that's going to help you, step into your strongest, healthiest and most empowered midlife. And I hope I can give you the conversations that are going to help you do just that. So thank you for being here and I hope you enjoy the podcasts.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Apologies, there has been rather a gap between this episode and the last. I've been rather caught up in my new private subscription podcast, Be Healthy with Amanda, and it's taken up quite a lot of my bandwidth, but we're in month 3 now and I've got more of a rhythm going, but it's just been busy with that and with clients. So apologies, it's been such a long time. But I'm back with a great conversation today. I'm joined by Colette McBeth, who describes herself as a storyteller and a business activator. She's a 2-time published author, and she helps women create powerful messaging, magnetic content, and helping them align their offers in their business. So great if you're an entrepreneur. But also, she's going to be really great if you're just someone who is feeling a little bit lost, wants to have a little bit more motivation, understand herself a bit better. I think this conversation is going to work for you. She's got a background in the BBC, which she's going to tell us about. But like I said, she brings a unique depth of storytelling and communication expertise to the work she does. And today we've used that and talked about that, how it can work for all of us in our everyday lives. And she helps us understand how to step into our own confidence, how to stop holding ourselves back, whatever that might look like in our own lives, and how to get more comfortable with the discomfort that comes from growth. And like I said, in whatever way that might express itself in your life, whether it's work or personally related. We explore during this conversation how to quiet that inner voice that often pulls us down, that inner critic, and how to move through fear, recognizing that often the frustration of staying stuck is far worse than the fear of taking action. I don't know about you, but my goodness, I know that firsthand. And we talk about how to give ourselves the space and time to really think about what we truly want. And Colette's got some great advice for that. We also talk about how to express ourselves more confidently in midlife, without falling into that people-pleasing model, maybe that we've always had going in the background, a sort of default setting, and how to start showing up in a way that feels more aligned and authentic to us. So I think you're going to find this a really great and thought-provoking conversation, and I'm really looking forward to sharing it with you. Hi, Colette. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So, Colette, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? I know that you are helping women to sort of shine in midlife, to, entrepreneurs like myself to sort of maximize what they do and how they do it and to have the confidence. And that all sounds very easy, but it's not so easy in midlife. Can we start with you telling us a bit about you and your story?
Yeah, sure. So I started off as a journalist and then went to the BBC and spent 10 years on television. I was the unglamorous one, kind of in a field or outside court, freezing my backside off, where the glamorous person was in the studio. And that was amazing. But actually what I always realized was there was the story and then there was the story and the story and the story, and that was what I was really interested in. And I went off, I'd had this burning desire, like that was one of the reasons I was a journalist, to write novels. And so I wrote the first draft of my first book in the BBC newsroom. I was kind of like hiding in the corner, hoping that nobody would ask me to do any proper work. So I wrote that, and then that kind of took off, and I got 2 traditional book deals. I was writing psychological thrillers. But the funny thing is, it's like, we have these dreams, don't we? And then we kind of live the dream in inverted commas, and actually it can, if you're not careful, turn into a bit of a nightmare. So for me, that was the dream of having book deals, of, going to literary events, having my books in shops. But actually, it was really solitary. I sat in this study, another version of this study in another house, with my characters and my thoughts for 12 months of the year, and 9 months of those 12 months, I never knew whether it was going to work or not. I think I just got I had always had this other ambition to run my own business, but I didn't really have the confidence, and I didn't know how to run a business. I didn't even know where to start.
Well, it sounds like you made it. You got 2 books published, and they sold well, presumably.
So I had 2 book deals. So there was four books in total. So 2 in each book deal. And but you know what? Ultimately, I was reflecting on this recently. Even though it is in my control to write the best book I can, what wasn't in my control was the marketing and the ultimate success of those books.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of authors feel that way. And
yes,
the publishing industry is worth a whole other podcast. But and so I think I just wanted more control of what I was doing and what I could grow. And that's, I suppose, what my business has given me.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And the whole, you kind of want to get a publisher, don't you, to publish your book. And then they say, yes, they will. And you're like, oh my goodness, I made it. And that's just such a tiny, tiny step of, the success of that book, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I was really lucky. I got the book deal of dreams. I remember, pushing my baby daughter, who was tiny at the time, in Sainsbury's. We were in the vegetable aisle, and my agent called and said, oh, they want to buy your book, and gave me the figure. And I was like dropping the courgettes in shock. But and so it was wild, it was more money than I'd ever come across. But the thing is, when you break it down, you get your money in installments. So then it becomes a lot less than the headline figure. But the other thing is, as you say, it's not within your control, because even though, they've given you all this money, you think, oh, they're going to do everything with it. The experience of a lot of authors is very different. It's like, if you're mid-list, it's just not always what you would love. And I understand it from a business point of view. There's too many books published, there's only supermarkets, bookshelves, there's less space, but it's not always the dream.
No. So do you still write, or?
No, I haven't. That was never really the plan, actually. I just thought, I kept on telling myself when I started my business that, next month I'll work on that book that I'd promised my agent 5 years ago. And I just started having so much fun with my business. And I thought, you know what, why don't I just see what happens with this? And now, I don't know. I think I would, if I wrote another book, which I probably will, it will be entirely on my terms. And I always said, I will never write a book because I'm writing to contract, because I need that money to pay the mortgage. I will write it when I'm totally free.
Yeah. And you're quite certain of that. So there's a good place to start, isn't it? Yeah. If you can. So writing books. You're also a TV reporter, writing books. Then you started your own business. What happened? How did you make that transition?
Well, so when I left the BBC, I was thinking I want to teach storytelling in business. I was pretty good at crafting a story and extracting.
Yes, yeah. I'm sure that's a skill, isn't it? That's quite a needed skill. Yeah.
Well, because people, if you imagine, people come to me with their businesses, and it's, what do you do? And they'll say, well, this and this and this and this and this. And I'll go, I think it's this. And I'll be like, how do you do that? But if you imagine when I was at the BBC and you're on a deadline and you're interviewing someone, and you've got like 20 seconds of them talking that you're going to extract for your report. And they're kind of waffling on, and you're like, I think what you mean to say is this. And so your brain is trained to really razor in on the absolute gold. And I think that skill has just served me so well. You know, it's like I'm a kind of heat-seeking.
Yeah. All these things you do in life, you sometimes look back and think, oh, was that the right thing to do? But you pick up all these sort of peripheral skills that you don't even know you have, that you just apply to your next project or your life.
And you know what? You've hit the nail on the head there, because a lot of women that I see who come to start their business in midlife think that they're starting afresh. You know, I always say it's like you feel like you were born yesterday, but in actual fact, that's so not true, because there's so many skills, and actually the story, you know, builds on that. So you come, even if it's a new business, even if it's something kind of feels entirely different to what you've done before, what you have learned before and your insight, right? Not just what you know, but your insight is part of what you bring to the table now. And I think that's where, you know, with even our lack of social or native social media skills, that's how we've got the edge.
Yeah. So we were talking about how you came to sort of transition to having your own business. So I'm interested to continue.
So it actually came out of a real massive disappointment. That was not even a nudge, but like a massive jolt from the universe. So I'd written my 5th book. It was out of contract, so it was kind of off genre. It was a passion project. I worked on it for 8 months, sent it to my agent. She said, I'm crying my eyes out. Like, I think this is going to be a massive big book. And she's a really good agent. And it didn't sell. So when I say it didn't sell to any publishers.
Right. Yeah.
So I thought, oh goodness, like I've put, you know, my family, our finances in jeopardy. And so I started my business like quite heavily in debt, you know, in a space of, I don't quite know, you know, which way to turn. And this has got to work. There was no safety blanket. I had, it had to work. And so I think if I cast my mind back, that the fact that there was no safety blanket, like, you know, it's like easy when people see, you know, me sharing stories now about the success I've created, it's easy to think, oh, it's all right for you because, you know, but it wasn't really all right for me because, you know, my husband and I, we earn equally. So my income was so important for the family. And I started with nothing. And the only thing that I had was the ability to communicate, like the ability to make people understand what I did and how it could impact their life and their business. And that's really what I teach, you know, because if you can do that, it's not even if you can do that, it's like you have to be able to do that in order to grow your business. Because if nobody understands what it is or they don't desire it, you're going to have a really hard time selling.
So your business essentially is helping entrepreneurs or wannabe entrepreneurs find their voice, find that sort of that insight into what they're doing and kind of, you know, tell that to the world so that they can, you know, be seen and understood and have a product that actually people, or a service that people want to employ.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to work with people who are already running businesses.
Okay. Yeah.
Previously, I would have worked, you know, maybe somebody had an idea, but I work now with people who are running a business. Quite often that idea for the business has come from a personal journey. So something that they might have gone through in midlife, nutrition, you know, maybe they've had an autoimmune illness, or you know, there's been I don't know, they were made redundant, you know, and they had to create something. There's all kinds of personal journeys. And so these women are really passionate about what they do, and they know what they do works, so they're expert. But the gap is how they're communicating that and how do people see, you know, what it can do for them. And so that's what I do. I kind of help them bridge that gap. So that I always say it's just about how do you make people want what you do without kind of, you know, ramming it down their neck. Nobody wants to do that.
No, they don't. It sounds, yeah, it's easier said than done, isn't it? Because just thinking about myself, I started a private podcast called Be Healthy with Amanda. It's a subscription podcast. It costs £5.99 a month. And, you get a 20-minute episode with me giving 2 health goals each week and, the accompanying recipes and an exclusive discount on any supplements I might order. And I started off a month ago. And yeah, it's got lots of subscribers, and so it's been brilliant, and I really am enjoying it, and I'm so enthusiastic about it. But today was my day to market it again and get out on Instagram, and I've got all these subscribers, but obviously I need more. It needs to grow, and it's quite hard keeping up that motivation, isn't it? When you're working by yourself.
Yes. But what I would also say is we can have systems. And again, where I started is not where I am now, because what I see is exactly what you've just described. It's like women who are like, yeah, we're really good at juggling. We can do it all. But there comes a point where we really don't want to do it all, or actually trying to do it all really undermines what we achieve. Yeah. So if you had that automated, then you wouldn't be kind of having that internal conversation with yourself of like, oh, I'm kicking myself because, I really need to get out there. But the sun is shining for the first day in 2 months. And actually, I'd just much rather be outside. And probably better for you at the time. So I think that's, women, I feel like women have been sold a big lie. It's like, oh, you can get out there and you can sell. And it's like, yeah, you can. But do you really want to do that every single day? Because just because you can? Or would you like a system, which we're all kind of, oh, I don't want to have systems. Would you like a system that sells for you? And that's also what I help people do, because I think particularly in midlife, like I know myself, I don't know about you, but, I've got elderly parents. We've had some health issues in our family, and I don't want to let go of my ambition just because of everything that's happening in life. So I think it's like a new era of, yes, you can have everything you want, but can we do it in a different way? Can we actually be a little bit cleverer about it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when you say have is this part of what you you kind of help with? You kind of help people set up systems so that, like, today I need to, it would be good to sort of have 3 posts that I can, schedule and get out there. But today, for whatever reason, even though everything's going as it should be and it's all going to plan, I'm not quite feeling it. And you kind of get on this sort of roller coaster with your feelings, like, oh, I'll do it, And then tomorrow I might have clients and, it'll be more of a rush kind of thing. And then, of course, you have to do the podcast as well. So it's just...
There's always something, isn't there?
Yeah, there's always something. So you have to be doing these things even when you don't feel like doing them, or you have to have those systems in place so that, I don't know, when you do feel like it, you sort of batch them. Is that the idea?
So what I'm talking about really is leverage. We're really good at doing everything, but what I am obsessed about is, can we not do everything, and can we just do one thing and maybe make that work for us in 3 different ways? So for instance, if I was to go and look at your Instagram, I'd be like, okay, Amanda, right, here's 3 really good posts that you did, I don't know, last week, a few weeks ago. You want to bring more people into the membership. Why don't we just put them on ads, right? Why don't we spend £2 to £3 a day, attract more people to your profile? So even though today you're like, oh, I didn't actually put that post out, it doesn't matter so much. I'm not saying you never have to put a post out, but it doesn't matter so much because you've already got, I don't know, maybe 20 new people to your profile, and 10 of those have followed you. And maybe some of those have even bought from you without you doing a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. No, good point. Yeah.
You just kind of go, that would be nice.
And you feel like you're going forward, but you haven't actually to. Yeah.
And the other thing is, you might notice this as well, but if we're sort of beholden to social media is a great thing, right? I hear lots of people moan about it, and, I moan about it sometimes as well, but I think it is an amazing thing, because otherwise we'd be networking, like until we sort of away. because we have no energy, or we'd be cold calling, or we'd be like putting adverts in newspapers, or in the yellow pages. Can you remember them?
Yeah, so
yeah. So we don't have to do that anymore. But it is about this leverage. Just because you can put a post out every day or twice a day doesn't mean to say you have to or you want to. So I'm always looking for the winners. Like, that's what I teach my clients. It's like, oh, that one did really well. Let's kind of put a bit of money behind it. And the money that you spend on that, if we do it well, is going to come back to you in, twice, 3 times as much, 4 times as much, because you're going to make more sales.
So I'm kind of making it specifically about me, but obviously I'm thinking about the listeners who, might have a job or might just feel like they don't quite have the voice they had, when they were younger women, and they kind of want to be a bit more invisible. I mean, what would you say to women who are feeling that way?
Yeah.
And I know I've been there. I've definitely been there, where I just feel like, actually, I don't really want to shine the light on me. I'll just do my own thing. And obviously hormones, lower estrogen can sometimes affect confidence. But you also see some women really kind of ramping it up, and other women not so. But what would you say to anybody who is thinking, I don't feel like putting myself out there?
Well, I tend to have a theory that wherever we're feeling frustration is actually a signal of where we need to go. So quite often, maybe you're not feeling like, I don't know, you're not feeling like putting yourself out there every day. Maybe you are, maybe at work, you're like, oh, goodness, do I really want to do this? Or maybe you don't. That's
Yeah, that could be possible.
Maybe you want to do something else. And yet I do genuinely feel that we become so good at kind of swallowing what we want and what we really want to say, that it gets to the point where is it that we don't have a voice? Is it that we want to be invisible? Or is it that we're just not really wanting to play anybody else's game anymore? And yet when we're not giving, full sort of oxygen to our dreams or our goals, that's where the real frustration happens. And that's where it's sort of, it's almost like a simmering resentment that you can feel, but you can't quite name.
Yes.
And so what I say is, if you are feeling that, I just get curious. I go, well, why am I feeling that? Like, what am I just really fed up with? What am I not prepared to put up with anymore? What is that guiding me to? I always say every issue becomes an insight. And that, for me, like, it's been one of the best ways that I've grown my business, but also just in life, actually. We can get quite down on ourselves about what we can't do. But I think it is a phenomenal time of, if I had my sweary head on here, I'd just be like, I'm not prepared to do that anymore. And just stepping into that energy of like, yeah, what is it that I want? And leaning into that. So I sometimes I think, is it like a lack of confidence, or is it just a lack of listening to yourself?
Yeah, it's a good point, because you always do have that. It's like you kind of always do have that energy for something you're really interested in. And you don't always have the energy for the mundane things that you feel like doing that. But some days you do, but some days you don't. But it's a sign, isn't it, that
I think our tolerance drops, doesn't it? Our tolerance for things that we either don't like, or people who aren't necessarily our people, like all of that.
It all changes. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's a really good time to change with it, isn't it? And to take stock and think, I don't like doing that anymore. Being with those people doesn't do anything for me anymore. They're not bad people, but they're just not lighting my fire anymore, or whatever it is. It is, whatever you say about midlife, it's such a good time to sort of take stock.
Yeah.
And find your voice and actually think it's fine to do what I want to do, not to do what I think I should be doing.
Yeah, I agree entirely. And I think, like, who I speak to is not the woman without any kind of, we're not being Pollyanna about this. Like maybe her hormones are raging. Maybe, like me, I feel more tired now. So previously, maybe I could do like a whole day of Zoom, and now I'd be like, oh, please no. So I have to arrange my diary differently.
Yes,
But
yeah.
again, that becomes an opportunity. So I'm like, well, what if I create more or just lean into the things that actually I find fun, and I could create more wealth like that while doing less. Great, there's an opportunity. Because if I was just still on that, no, I've got to do all this, yourself. If you're busy in your business, you can't grow your business.
Yeah.
So it's always an opportunity. But like I say, I tend to focus on the women who are, do you know what? I'm not prepared to put up with that anymore. I'm determined. I always say, like, I have a lot of clients who would potentially work with women in perimenopause. And I always talk about what I call the expansive client. So if I give you an example, if you take just an average book club, there might be 10 women in that book club. And you could go in, Amanda, and you could talk about nutrition. And there would be everyone in that book club who would need your nutritional advice if they were between 40 and 55, right? Pretty much every woman across the board. But there would be quite a substantial number of women who'd be like, yeah, I know I need that advice, but I'm just kind of prepared to go along with it. So therefore, you spend all your time convincing those women that they need your help. Or you could just speak to the women who are like, do you know what, Amanda? I'm with you. I'm done with feeling like this. I know my diet needs, a makeover. I want to feel this energy that has been kind of ghosting me for a while. And I'm ready to make my midlife the most insanely successful, energetic period of my life. I'm like, talk to them. Your business will be a lot easier.
Yes, yeah, rather than to convince them all that, yeah. It's once you take a step back, you can see all this stuff, can't you? But when you're sort of just being you're on autopilot and you're doing what you've always done.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I do think this time of life is a good time to not just carry on doing what we've always done. And I think that's where the frustration comes. It's like, maybe that's telling you that you shouldn't just carry on doing what you've always done. So maybe it's not frustration. Maybe it's a lovely kind of signal that you can do something differently.
Yes, yeah. And not everybody, I'm just sort of thinking of women I know, wants to change. They're quite happy with what they're doing and how they're doing it. And they don't need that sort of big business or something different, but it's just always good to have purpose, I think, isn't it? And to have a reason to get out of bed. I mean, whether that's because you're looking after your family or, you've got a really brilliant job that you're going to, or you're growing a business. It's just, we all need that little spark of something, don't we, to keep us going?
Yeah, I think regardless of whether it's a business or you want to climb Mount Kilimanjaro or you just want to do like the park run, or you want to feel healthy, it's a sense of aliveness, I think, that we all want. I think that's the communal thing. And I don't care how you find that aliveness, but I would really like every woman to, find it. And I think that's a personal journey. And that, we're so bombarded with things on Instagram or like, do this, eat more protein, go with your circadian rhythms and like get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. And it's exhausting. And ultimately, you kind of have to go, well, what makes me feel alive, and take control, and then sort of lean on the best advice that will help you, not, all the other women who, aren't exactly like you.
Is that what you did, Colette?
Do you mean with my business or with life?
Well, both really. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
obviously your business is a big part of your life by the sounds of it.
Yeah, but actually, I think my business has led to a lot of personal development because, you can't, well, this, but you can't put offers out and kind of, invite people to buy from you without going, oh my God, like, what if nobody wants to buy from me? And that becomes, if you let it, that could become like a judgment on you and your value. So you have to find ways of, like moving through that. And not attaching your worth to, what people are saying about you, or what, the money in your bank account, all of those kind of things, even on a really kind of minor level. Like I was a journalist, right? So I was so used to finding the negative in everything, because that's what we're looking for. The news stories tend to be the negative stories. And so when I realized that I trained my brain like that, I was like, well, I want to untrain it and I want to reprogram it. And so every morning I just thought, right, before I do anything, I'm just going to think of 10 things that I'm grateful for. That's it. 10 things, like really tiny things. Like, I love my Egyptian cotton sheets, or there's a chink of light coming through the blinds, or even my husband, who, I could be really resentful of. And actually, it improved my marriage, because I realized that I was really grateful for my husband, and he saw the difference in me, and he was like, "Oh, you don't moan as much, and you don't seem to be as like resentful." And so I think the power, like we always look at these big things that we have to change, but it's so easy just to kind of go, oh, this is a really good cup of green tea. Like, isn't that amazing? Like, I've just walking out today and seeing the sunshine and feeling the breeze on my face. All of those things, if you begin to register them, I personally think those are the most transformational things. Those things will change your life. So I think that's what I've done more than anything else. And that's what my business, I probably wouldn't have done that if I hadn't needed to, but I'm very grateful that I did.
So by sort of, reflecting on your life and being grateful and actually naming it and thinking about it and having a bit of a practice as to, this morning I'm grateful for these 3 things or whatever. What does that actually do to your brain then, that you act differently?
Because you start seeing more of them. I mean, is it your RAS? I always talk about this to my husband. He's like, what are you talking about? So it's your reticular activating system. So, if you have just bought a new car, right, you probably see more of those cars on the road, right? So that's because you're tuned into it. So the more you see positive things, the more you're going to see positive things. And then before you know it, your perspective, i.e. your reality, shifts. So now you're not looking at all the negative things, the more and more and more positives are coming into your reality, because you identify as somebody who sees those things. It's actually, and this is partly storytelling, it's like if your identity is somebody who sees the positives, then your brain is going to process more of them and bring them into your field. If you identify as somebody who never has any money, you're always going to see where, oh God, I've got to pay that bill. And you're going to overlook maybe where you had a little minor windfall.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So it's sort of shifting your perception of your reality, I suppose.
Well, because our reality, as we think is true, isn't really the reality. It's just a perception, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And we all perceive, our world differently. I mean, if I could get into your brain and you could get into mine, we'd be having a different conversation.
Yeah. So you've just been to Vietnam. Maybe you went to Ho Chi Minh City and you were like, it's amazing. It's amazing. Somebody else could go and think, this is so busy. It's like, it's my least favorite place I've ever been to. Okay. That was you.
I did find it quite busy.
Yeah. But some people love that.
Yeah.
My son has just been there. He said the same thing. He's like, it's so busy. And then his girlfriend was in the background going, I love it. And it's like, well, you're both in the same place. You're both doing the same thing. It's a different perception.
So that's one skill that we can think about in order to live our best lives and actually, get a bit more in touch with the positive side of us. But is there anything else you'd say that, because a lot of us, we have a story about ourselves and we get stuck in that story, whether that's to do with, love life, money, kids, aging, jobs, whatever. How can we kind of find that inner voice or that inner confidence when, we're going along doing what we've always done? So we, practice a bit of gratitude, but what else is there?
Yeah, well, through a storytelling lens, we can, again, tell ourselves a story that is just a story. So, my husband might say something like, but I can't do that. Like, I always struggle with that. And I'm like, well, that's not really true, is it? Because you're just telling yourself that. So therefore it becomes a truth. So what I always do, I used to have a story that no matter what happened in terms of money, we would always snatch defeat from the jaws of victory, right? So whenever there was a windfall, it's like, oh, it's gone again. And then we started really analyzing that story and thinking, is that actually true? Like, am I really bad with money? Because that's the story I used to tell myself, which is therefore really difficult to attract more wealth if that's what you identify with. And so I started to look at it and think, I got this big book deal. And the story that I was telling myself was that within 18 months that money had gone. But when I actually looked at the evidence, and that's what I would say to people, like, rather than just accepting the story, can you start looking at the evidence, like as if you were in a court of law, and you're like, actually that's not strictly true. When I looked at the evidence, what we'd spent that money on was a house renovation, and that house renovation ended up making quite a lot of money. But it was just what my perception again. So I do think, I'm lucky, I'm unlucky in love. Well, here's two things that I would do. If you feel that that's true, and maybe you currently have the evidence, then you need to look at the patterns that are driving you there, right? And that's an opportunity. So, if you keep on, for instance, attracting unavailable men, well, you could just hope that it could become different, or you could put yourself in the driving seat and go, why is this happening? Like, what could I unpick? What patterns? And how can I start to override those patterns? Or you can also go, is that always true? So those are two things that I think get ourselves out of, I don't want to say victim mode, but, put ourselves back in control.
I mean, it's very easy to fall into that victim mode, isn't it? If you speak, myself, I speak to my friends, if we're not careful, we have an off day and down we go, with that narrative.
Yeah. And I think that's hormones as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
But, sometimes I just go, is it the weather or the climate? Right. If I'm having, a bit of a rubbish day today, and, I've had a lot, like recently, probably felt more emotion than I ever have in my life. And, that's really interesting in terms of when you're feeling like that, you think it's always going to be dark, but it's a cloud, isn't it? It's like, that's the cloud. Absolutely. There's blue sky behind.
Yeah. I've got that now, 56. I've actually understand that when I'm down here, I'm like, this isn't forever. This is just a little dip and I'll go back up again. And actually the dips usually mean that you rebound and, then on the high again. And I am a person that is quite up and down. Some people, obviously, their bumps aren't quite as deep and profound, but we're all different, aren't we? But I think that's the joy in some ways of being in your 50s, that you do recognize your own, your own patterns and your own traits.
Yeah, I agree. And, I think we'd probably, if we want to, there's so much more out there that we can access in terms of support than there ever was. I don't think our mothers had the access to the same support. They were still kind of eating Special K if they wanted to, look good. Yeah. So, and nobody really talked about their feelings in the way that we do now. So I think we are quite lucky.
I think we're definitely very lucky. Yeah. So kind of continuing on down that kind of vein, what do you think about manifestation? I mean, as what you've just spoken about, is that all part of, like, I mean, I listen to some people and they say, like, like Joe Dispenza, for example, I'm sure you know who he is. He talks in his book about, we all have to manifest our reality, and there's several different realities, and, it's all out there. It's just, how we bring it into our lives. What are your thoughts on manifesting?
Well, I should say I am not an expert. I am not a manifestation teacher, but I do think that, so I look at this from a storytelling perspective. And as I was just saying, what happens is, if your identity is of a person who is unlucky in love or never gets promoted or, is really bad with money, then what your brain does, because there's like, I don't know, I think it's about 3 billion bits of information that come at you every single second. And your brain can't possibly process them all, bring them all to your attention. So what your brain is essentially sifting, like that's not relevant to you because, that positive part isn't relevant to you because you're thinking negatively about money. So it's going to bring more of those into your field, right? And therefore you see more of those things. So you have more evidence and it just compounds, right? It's like the constant validation of your identity. Your identity isn't who you are, but you think it's who you are. It's quite like, and so I find that perspective very freeing. So I'm like, okay, if I can change who I think I am and what I identify with, then I can start to change my reality. Because even on a neuroscience level, and again, I'm not a neuroscientist, I'm a storyteller, but on a neuroscience level, your brain starts to feed you more information because now you're like, oh, I'm really good with money. So it's like, oh, there's 2 pence down there on the. Does anybody even have 2 pence anymore? But I've just found a £5 note in the pocket of my trousers that I didn't realize. Oh, I'm really lucky. So I mean, I do think storytelling is a form of manifesting. I think speaking things out loud, the way we speak to ourselves and the way, we articulate any issues can have a really positive or negative effect. So one of the things I always pick my husband up on is that he says, oh, but the problem is, and I'm like, he might say that.
Already started a negative kind of,
yeah. He might say that 5 times a day. And I'm like, is it really that much of a problem? Or it's that constant reinforcement. So I would be really careful now about how I speak. So instead of going, oh my God, I'm really struggling with this, I say, you know what, this is like quite challenging, but I know I'm going to find a way through. Like when I work with my clients and they're like, I'm so stuck. And I'm like, you're not. You're a really resourceful woman.
Mm-hmm.
And this is coming up for a reason, but we're going to work through it. You're not stuck. You tell yourself you're stuck, you're going to be stuck.
Yeah, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Yeah, absolutely. And do you see certain patterns in sort of midlife women that you work with?
I'm really lucky that I work with women who, as I say, they probably come to what they do through, tends to be not exclusively, but a personal journey. They're really passionate about what they do. One of the patterns that does come up is that do they get to have an opinion, which isn't necessarily one shared by everyone? And for me, that's how you actually say something. If you believe it, we're not just manufacturing opinions for the sake of it. But if you believe in something and you're not saying it, then that's going to have a negative effect. Like, why would people pay much attention to you? Because right now, if you're putting content out on social media, there's so much content, so much. So it's the people who can disrupt your beliefs, right? What do you think you have to do? What you believe in? It's those people who have a different perspective and can shift your beliefs that are going to win. Right. And the problem is, or the challenge is, that a lot of women in midlife don't feel that they get to have that without being, I don't know, maybe trolled by someone, or maybe there's someone who's they've got a bigger account and they've got 20 years in nutrition and you've got 15. And who am I to say this? But that's, we get to say what's true for us and our people.
Again, it's quite hard to do, isn't it? It's easy to describe. And, a lot of women that I work are quite fearful to, myself sometimes included, to really express what you're feeling and go on Instagram and suddenly be confronted, or Twitter or whatever it might be, with lots of negativity. And I sometimes know the theory of Instagram, but can't always, my son says, why don't you go on and say, something about some big influencer, and you'll suddenly get, but it's like, I don't want to do that. That isn't.
No. And I wouldn't encourage that. But I mean, do you have if you were to get on your soapbox, do you have something that
Yes,
you
absolutely. And
Okay.
I was going to go on to say, however, if it's something that I really believe in, then I have no trouble at all. It just kind of comes through. I have to kind of think about that. Otherwise, I probably still would just sort of take a step back. But now you're asking, yeah, I mean, certainly in my, some things, some battles you don't care about, you just let them pass. They're not your battle, are they, to win? And others are like really stake you up, and you think, no, I'm gonna say what I mean here. But I suppose in business or you're trying to grow something, or you believe in something, like, Be Healthy with Amanda, I think is, I'm really hoping I've hit on something there, because I've been working in this space for a long time, and I wanted to make something accessible for everybody, because nutritional therapy one-on-one can get quite expensive, and not everybody can afford, 3 sessions, £400 or whatever. But that is what it costs to see a nutritional therapist. And, that nutritional therapists aren't making, the same amount of money as lawyers. They most of them are doing it because they enjoy the work, they're not doing it for the money. So I do feel, I do feel very passionate about it, and I do think it can help a lot of women. I really believe in it. And when I went to do a post on sort of, telling people about it, it came very easily, because I didn't feel like I was masquerading. It just felt like, no, this is, I'm just speaking, speaking my truth kind of thing, and what I believe. And but it's taken me a while to get there, to discover what it is I wanted to do.
So the easiest way, I always say, is, again, storytelling. So I don't know, if you were to give me an example of something that you're like, oh, I don't feel that this really works. There's people out there saying, do this in terms of nutrition. But what you see for your clients is that that's not really having such an impact. Then we let the story do the heavy lifting, because you just say, well, I know that there are people out there saying that. But, in reality, in my practice, what I'm seeing is that it's too complicated. Like, these women are holding down, big jobs, but they have aging parents to look after. Their kids are maybe going through A levels. We need to make this super simple. So it's not that you're saying across the board any kind of, and I'm just making things up here as an example. It's not that you're saying across the board any kind of, like more complicated nutritional therapy wouldn't work. But for your clients, right, what I call the expansive client, it doesn't work. If it's too complicated, she's not going to do it. If it's too complicated, she's going to get overwhelmed, go, oh my God, no, thank you. So we're always like, it's the kind of your methodology matched to the person who's right for your work. And then we just let the story carry it. It's like, I'm not really saying this. I'm just telling you what I see. Feels a lot less heated.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, I've, come to discover over the years that what I'm best at doing is communicating and motivating people. And, but it's taken me a while to sort of unravel that and to say it out loud, because it feels like I can't say that I'm good at that. I should be like really modest and, oh, I'm no good at that. It's like, oh, am I? Oh, well, let's not, and that is kind of a typical reaction, isn't it? Nobody really, I don't know. I find with my girlfriends and the women that I work with, not many come in and go, I'm really good at this. Most are wanting to play it down.
We were all told not to boast when we were growing up. My daughter, so my daughter said, oh, you know what? I am really, she did well in the maths test. And she said, so I said, oh, your tutor said, you're really good at maths. She went, yeah, I am good. And then she went, well, I shouldn't really say that, should I? And I went, of course you should say that. It's exactly what you should say.
Yeah.
It's, I think we should sit with that discomfort. If you just gave yourself a few minutes to go, do you know what? I am absolutely brilliant at this. Like, what would that be? And how could you say that without cringing? And why would you even be cringing? Because
it's quite ingrained, isn't it?
Yeah, but like we do have the opportunity to change it.
Yeah, it's good to experiment with that. Because
What do you say you're really, apart from the communication, what would you say you're really, really good at? If you didn't edit yourself or censor yourself?
yeah, like having relationships with people, bonds with people, making a bond with people, connecting with people. That's probably my, my number one skill, I think.
Yeah. Did that feel kind
Yeah,
of?
it feels like, oh my God, I can't say that out loud on my podcast. But if I ever
You
think about,
did.
if I ever think about, all the good things in my life, it's that's really taken me a long way and brought a lot of joy into my life because I can do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I do feel a bit uncomfortable saying that out loud. But
Practice.
how can other women, how can they sort of celebrate their own sort of unique gifts? How would you, by just asking themselves, how do we get there?
Oh, we did something. I mean, you can do this with your friends. It might be a bit cringy, but I was away skiing with my friend and her kids, and we were at lunch, and the kids, they're like siblings, so they were all kind of arguing. And I was like, okay, everybody just has to go. We're just going to go around the table, and we're all going to say what we love about this person. Like, what's the best thing about this person? And even then, the kids were like, this is really uncomfortable. But by the end, they were like, oh, thank you. And all the kind of tension at the table had just dropped. And I think,
Oh, nice. Yeah.
yeah, sometimes I ask my clients, I say, well, if you had, if somebody sent you a DM, a message tomorrow, and it was the most like amazing testimonial you could have, write down what they would say. Like, what would they say about you? It's such an exercise in like exposure, but I also think it's necessary. Or just to, again, stop talking yourself down. As women, we're really good when we get a compliment and you go, oh, yeah, it's just nothing. Or, oh, I love your outfit. Oh, this thing is like really old. And so, again, I would stop doing that and just take a breath and go, oh, thanks. Yeah, I feel like, someone says you look
Think of
good.
the compliment. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I do look kind
Absorb
of
it.
hot tonight. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. If you can't accept a compliment, it's going to be really difficult to celebrate yourself.
Yeah. 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 But it's just, you just see it over and over again. I remember somebody, a really good friend on the breathing course, and I'm sure she won't mind me saying this, but, at the end, Polly says, and then send yourself lots of love.
Yeah.
And, some people really struggle with that because they just find it hard to connect with like sending yourself love, because obviously something internally sort of doesn't, that just doesn't sit right with them. They love other people and then be really kind to other people, but actually, reflecting that back to themselves can feel quite difficult.
Yeah. Again, just kind of going, well, what are the, that thing. It's like, oh, I'm really grateful to past me for doing this. I'm grateful to past me for, I don't know, putting the sheets on my bed in the clean sheets on my bed rather than coming up and going, oh, still got to put the clean sheets. It can be that small. So I think if you are that person who isn't used to sending yourself any love or celebrating yourself, it's a little bit much to expect that, tomorrow you can kind of strut out into the world and go, I'm amazing. It's not really going to happen, and it's going to make you feel weird. So how is it that you take yourself from there up to here? Well, you do it with tiny, tiny micro actions and moments like, oh, I just made a really good cup of tea. You know when I make a really amazing cup of tea? Or that cake is so fluffy. Nobody quite makes the cake like me. Or my kids, like my kids say thank you after dinner. Wow, didn't I do a good job? All those things, like if you imagine the cumulative effect of those things.
Yeah. And a very successful person, and you say to them, oh my God, you're so good at that. And oh, that's brilliant. Oh, how did you think that? Is there nothing you can't do? Oh, now she's done this and now she's done that. Oh, and she can also, lend a hand to that. She's just kind of does all these things. And then that person becomes that person, that capable person, that person that can do anything. And a lot of it's because they've had that kind of positive affirmation their whole life that they can do things. And so they start living by that truth. Whereas somebody who's had the opposite, like, oh, you can't do that, or, you silly woman, shut up, or I don't think I've had too many sexist problems in my life, but definitely as a young woman in my 20s, I was seen as fluffy and, don't take me too seriously. Definitely experienced that. I don't think it's quite as bad for women now. But, a few times I remember thinking, God, what does he think I am? I'm not that, weak and pathetic. But, they were sort of projecting that onto you a little bit. So some, older men kind of.
I sort of believe that, I don't know. I don't know how much men have really changed. Like, I would hope as a mother of 2 boys, I've done my part in that. But I still probably see like young women, they're probably still doing the, bulk of the childcare. There's expectations. Recently my girls' school, the girls were getting detentions for not wearing the school regulation leggings, but the boys could wear whatever they wanted. And it was just like, oh, come on. And I don't think we're that far away from it. And I do think we can feel it's like righteous rage of, what's gone on in the past. I remember being at Sky News and the news editor, I was deputy news editor at the time, and one of the bosses came out, saw one of our reporters on air, and he went, "Look at her fat ass." I mean, that was in 2000, right? It wasn't like, it's not.
Not the 70s, 80s. Yeah, gosh.
No.
Yeah. Oh, you've only got to look at the news to know it's still out there. But but I do see with my daughter's generation, it's not as prevalent anymore. And I do think, she's taken more seriously than maybe I would have been at the same age.
Well, that's good.
But that is progression. But there's a long way to go, isn't there? And finally, just wanted to talk about being fearful. And sometimes you hear people talk about being successful, whatever success that is, whether it's in your personal life, your professional life. But what can we do to overcome fears? Sometimes, people say, oh, you're not being as successful as you could because you're a bit fearful. What are your thoughts on that?
I just think maybe we need to stop being fearful of being fearful.
Right, okay.
I mean, I don't know anybody who doesn't have, maybe they're a psychopath or whatever, I don't know, but I don't know anybody.
Quite normal.
Isn't really fearful. My daughter plays cricket, and if she's got a match coming up, she's like, oh, I'm a bit scared. And I'm like, okay, but most sports people, like even the elite sports people, are going to feel a little bit of adrenaline or fear. Can we rename that? Can we maybe say, oh, it's, I've got butterflies, but those butterflies are, they're going to help me play better. The biggest thing that I see stops women from moving towards what they want, whatever that is the fear of being in fear. And that's an avoidance of discomfort. So we kind of want something different to what we have, but we don't want to be uncomfortable in order to get there. And I just think that the more we are comfortable with discomfort, the more doors are going to open up to us. Because, just to give you an example from my business, like if a client, she puts an offer out and nobody buys right away, I go, okay, what's happened? Nobody's bought right away. Is that the worst thing in the world? No, right? Well, they definitely wouldn't have bought if you hadn't put the offer out, which is what fear would have stopped you doing. So now can we look at what's really going on? And then we build on that. So next time, or even, in 2 days' time, now she's got some sales. But the avoidance of that discomfort is like, we're not getting the lesson and we're kind of letting ourselves off the hook.
Yeah. So, if I'm feeling fearful about something, I'll just go and do something else, like make a coffee or take the dog for a walk and just procrastinate a bit. But then when I do actually do the thing I'm fearful of, being on the other side of that feels so nice. And I try and remember how that feels to actually get me over the inertia to start. And you always feel better on the other side. And the thought process is always much worse than the reality of just doing it.
100%. So the thing is, the discomfort of avoiding discomfort, i.e. not doing the thing, is so much greater. It's what you've just described, isn't it? It's so much greater than actually doing the thing. You're like, oh, I mean, it's a little bit like if you ever stood on the edge of, or the sea, right? You want to go in for a sea swim. You're like, oh my goodness, it's going to be freezing. And it is freezing when you get in, but then you feel amazing afterwards. Whereas you could have just stood there and got really annoyed with yourself for not doing it. It's that just kind of internal frustration of not doing things that I personally think is more uncomfortable than the discomfort of doing it.
I suppose if you set yourself up ready to do it, it's kind of, if you're standing at the edge of the sea with your bikini on or your wetsuit, you're like, well, I've got to this stage. I mean, we live in Cambridge. If I get to the sea, I have to go in.
Yeah.
But it's just setting your life up like that, isn't it? That is making it harder to retreat rather than to move forward.
Yeah. One question that I quite often ask myself if I'm beginning to feel the stirrings of that, like, what could I have done by Friday that would make me feel really good? What discomfort could I have got over? And then I just do it.
Yeah. Great advice. Yeah. Okay, Colette. Well, that has been an hour. I was thinking it was about 22 the hour, but it's actually on the hour now. Oh. Thank you so much. Can you just, if anyone's listening and they're sort of, they've listened to the conversation and they've picked up lots of good advice, but is there one thing that you'd say to midlife women to give them, maximum kind of confidence to find their inner voice or their inner purpose, or, however we want to say it?
I would say that when you actually tap into what you really want to say or really want to do, it feels a little bit like a colonic for the soul. You're like, oh, that feels lighter. And that's always going to feel so much lighter than holding on to things. Quite often in midlife, I don't really think we've ever given ourselves the space or the time to actually listen to what we want. And that builds resentment. So actually just sitting with that for a moment. And then, as I say, just taking those micro steps. Maybe that looks like saying no to somebody tomorrow when you would have just almost automatically said yes. Maybe that's just you kind of going, calling time on that friendship that's not really a friendship, that sucks the life out of me. And just gradually kind of, rediscovering that voice again. It doesn't have to be, a full belting song right away, but just bit by bit, you're going to, stretch your vocal cords.
Start the process. Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you. So do you tell us how people can find you? Is it just working with you in a business kind of, for business, or do you coach people? Obviously we've talked a lot about, fear and, our underlying kind of feelings. Is it just sort of storytelling and help people build up their business that you do?
I do. Yeah. That is the thrust of what I do.
Right.
So I'm over on Instagram at the Colette McBeth.
Yeah.
That is the best way to find me.
Okay. Well, I'll leave that link as well in the show notes, but thanks again, Colette. Thanks for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your company. I know there are so many podcasts out there, so my promise to you is no nonsense, practical advice that adds real value to your life. So if you enjoyed this episode, you know the drill. Now, I'd really appreciate it if you could like, follow, or click subscribe, or even send it to someone who might benefit from this information. It truly helps me grow the podcast and keeps me going. And if you'd like to know more about my own personal approach to food, HRT, movement stress, and self-connection, my book is available in paperback. I'd also love to hear from you, so don't hesitate to leave a comment or get in touch. And that just leaves me to say I am sending lots of love and light from my midlife goddess to yours.